right, we're starting. Welcome, everybody. Everybody needs a piece of paper. Take one and pass it around. We will talk about the homework and stuff in a little bit, but we're going to begin with a game. Nope. All right, you're going to have to write a little small because you're going to have to keep rewriting things and changing things as you go. Write something like this, but don't use those numbers. Use any number between 1 and 9. Make a little square. So you make it a grid of just 2 by 2. And you're just filling them with random digits. Okay? And below it, put, or somewhere on the page, you're going to put this number n, which is like your score. And n is going to go up and down. Okay. Raise your hand when you have all that ready.
Do we start with n equals 2?
Yes, everyone starts with n equals 2. The other 4 numbers are random. And they're always going to be single digits between 1 through 9. What?
0?
No zeros, just 1 through 9. Now we're going to do neighbor interactions. I'm going to tell you how it's going to go, and then you'll do it. You will turn to either your left or your right, or someone behind you or in front of you. And then we're going to do this series of steps, and then you'll do it again with a different neighbor. And the series of steps will go like this. If you have 0 numbers in common from the 4 grid, the 2 by 2, 0 numbers in common, then you both take 1 number from the other. If you do that, you will then both have 2 numbers in common, right? Because you're going to take different numbers. You want to make it so that you have 2 numbers in common if you start off with 0. If you start off with 1 number in common, just one of you, randomly choose, doesn't matter. One of you takes a number from the other. At the end of that, how many numbers would you have in common? 2, right? Because you had 1 number in common, then one of you took a number from the other, but not the one, not overriding the one that was common. That's the key. So after each of those first 2 possibilities, having 0 in common or 1 in common, after that step, you each, with that 1 neighbor, you now have 2 numbers in common. Okay. Now, if you start off already having 2 numbers in common with your neighbor, then both of you get to add 1 point to your n, okay? And you take 1 number from the other, which means now you have how many in common? 3. It could be 4. Actually, let's make that one of you take 1 number from the other. See. Oh, I'm not allowed to change it. Because it's just a shared doc now. Okay. Let's keep it like this and see what happens. So actually, we'll make it more like that before. So one of you take 1 number, the same thing here. One of you take 1 number from the other. Now, if you have 3 numbers in common with your neighbor already, don't take any numbers, but you get to double your n, okay? Whatever n you have, just double it. Then if you both have 4 numbers in common, you have, it could be different orders, but you have 4 numbers in common, you both have to set your n back to 1. And then you choose random numbers.
So if you take one number from the other, you replace with your other number?
Yes.
Okay.
But not the one you have in common with them.
Position doesn't matter.
Position doesn't matter. All right. Go ahead. Question? Okay. Everyone, do 1 round with a neighbor, and then stop and raise your hand when you're done. Or tell me when you're done. Yeah. One person takes the number.
Yeah.
Or you wait after one step. One. Yeah, the ones that you wait, tell me when you're all done. Okay. Now choose another neighbor and do it again.
There you
You already did it?
I think they're all.
We're gonna do 3 rounds and then stop.
So I'm going with got it. Got the 7.
Three rounds total. Different person every time. Do you want to?
I'll take
3 rounds.
think about it. Oh, I did it work. Once we do that, then I do like I.
Has everyone done 3 rounds? All right, does anyone have an N higher than 10?
I have 10.
You have 10 exactly?
Yeah.
Does anyone have 10 as well? We got 2 10s. Okay. So for each of the 10s, I want you to read your 4 numbers. If anyone else has those exact 4 numbers, then you both get set back to N equals 1.
Yeah.
Okay, you first. Read your 4 numbers.
1, 3, 7.
Does anyone else have that? Raise your hand if you have that. No one else has that. Okay, you get to say a 10.
1987.
Any other 1987? No. All right. Does anyone have just 3 of those numbers? We got a few people with 3 of them. Okay, we're gonna do this one more time. 3 neighbor interactions. It can be the same 3 people. Go. No, same grid, same numbers.
Lights to. Go bitch. 7, 6. Just take one from the second. You want to take one? I thought. I like that. Oh, that's cheap.
Are we done with all 3? All right. Who thinks they have the most points? How many do you have?
22.
22. Ooh, how many do you have? 30. How many do you have?
Good job. Okay.
Read out your numbers.
6, 2, 4,
Does anyone else have 6, 2, 4, 7?
7.
All right, you get to keep it. Good job. Okay, now let's analyze what happened here. We're going to analyze in a couple ways. First of all, how many of you have a 1? I'm going to guess that's over half the class. How many of you have a 2? That's maybe this many. How many of you have a 3? Okay. How many of you have a 4? How many of you have a 5? Hardly anybody. Okay. How many of you have a 6? Okay. How many of you have a 7? How many of you have an 8? How many of you have a 9? So we started off with a random, supposedly uniform distribution. At least that's what we're drawing from. We don't have that now. If we played this many more rounds, what do you think would happen to this distribution?
Continue to consolidate.
Now, if it consolidated too much, what happens? You reset. You both go back to n equals 1, and you get 4 random digits. Now, n is supposed to represent fitness. The environment that you live in is like a fitness landscape. Now, there's a lot of complexity that we did not get into. We'll talk about this in other ways, but today we're going to talk about genetic algorithms. In the context of a genetic algorithm, what do you think those 4 numbers are? Someone say it?
I don't remember this called, but it's the algorithm that's like the life algorithm or whatever.
Life is the game of life is a good one. All right, well, just think about it. We'll get into it. All right, now this environment that we just played this game in, you can think about it as a fitness landscape. If you have certain numbers in relation to the numbers of your neighbors, you can do really well. You can increase your n by 1 or even double it, right? I mean, how many doublings did you have? 4 doublings. So 4 times he could double. Now, if he was too similar to his neighbors, then he would just drop back to 1. But he had just the right amount of similarity. And he ended up with a number that was way higher than the rest of you guys. So the other distribution is the distribution of n's. And this is the distribution that I think will be a power law. Power laws show up in nature all the time. Okay. How many people had 1 point at the end? How many people had 2? Okay, so 2. How many people had 3? How many people had 4? How many people had 5? 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. 11. 12. This is not what I expected. 13. Look at that. 14. 15. 16. 17. 18. 19. 20. 22. Oh, 21. 21? No, 22, 3 people. 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36. That's it. Okay. Well, this is not the distribution I expected at all. What tends to happen in systems and networks is you tend to get a lot of people down here and very few people over here. They see this pop up in all kinds of natural systems, but you can also see it in Facebook. So Facebook, you'll have, most people will have a certain number of friends. Be a few people like one or two friends, but then a bunch of people cluster around here, and then there's very few people with thousands and many thousands of friends. And what tends to happen is if you're entering a network that already exists, where you have a bunch of people that are like the nodes and they have lots of friends, the people who have lots of friends are more likely to become your friends. And so people who already have lots of friends find it easier to make more friends. In all the social networks that we've devised so far, that seems to happen again and again. So networks, by their very nature, seem to help inequality emerge. It just emerges from networks. And you see this in living systems. And living systems is what we're going to talk about today and how it applies to computer science. Okay, now let's talk about tonight's homework a little bit. I know one person has actually solved the 9-block thing with randomness. Has anyone else? 2, 3, 4. Okay, how long did it take?
Hour and a half. I left it on overnight. It took like 4 billion steps.
Sub 20 minutes, though, really.
Yeah, I think he was the luckiest. It took me 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And there were people here who let it run for 16 hours and it didn't solve. Now, you might want to check your work. Now, one of those people, they tried it with 8 and it worked. If you try it with 8 and it works, but then you try it with 9 and it doesn't work, just keeps computing, you might just be getting unlucky. Now, someone also, by the way, if it just does not solve, run it for like 3-4 hours and tell me it did this many steps and it did not solve it. But then also try with 8.
For Google Colab, if you're not like actively signed into the document, I believe it stops after 90 minutes. But then
Yeah,
you have,
90
like,
minutes.
I think so. But I think you have up to 12 hours, 30 minutes here.
Leave it open for sure. Do you have to be actually looking at the tab, or can it be open somewhere? Okay. Keep it open for sure. Okay. Now, some of you were asking about the hash table that we're using to make sure you don't repeat steps. Someone brought up a situation when that might be a bad thing. Let's say you've tried 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's say you've tried this and you don't want to try it again. The next thing you tried was here, then maybe here. But you have to get back to the 8 again before you can solve it. So maybe the hash table is a bad idea. But I'm going to tell you that it actually depends on how you're representing the search space. If you represent it in that tree where the branching factor is going to be way more than 2. It's going to be however many moves you could take in that moment. So the branching factor from your game states is different at every node. So this is a complex tree. So let's say you're exploring this tree. Even if you're randomly choosing, you devise a tree that is unambiguous. Let's say that you can move the 4, 5, 6, or the 7. And for each of those, you have you have 8 places you could put it, right? 8 other locations. So that would be 32 possible branches off from one place. Let's pretend you were able to put these all or represent this tree as you go. It doesn't have to be created ahead of time, it just be a way of thinking about this. As long as you're going to randomly explore all of these options, what the hash table prevents you from doing is going back up the tree from a different node. That's all you want to prevent. If you're going to do depth first or breadth first, just have your tree be your guide on what to try next. And if you've already been here, just don't go there again. I mean, try this, then this, then this, then this, and the children of this one. So depending on how you fill up the hopper, in a sense, of the next game state you're going to try, using that hash table should not block you. Any questions on that part?
In order to do that, wouldn't we have to disregard the constraint where we were only allowed to move a block either one space left? Or
Yes. Yes. You could still keep the restraints and it would actually make your tree simpler. But one thing I mentioned in the last class, I think we should remove that constraint. Sorry, were you able to solve it without?
Well, I
With
did
the
both. I originally did it without that constraint, but then I did it.
And it works still. Good job. Okay. We know it's solvable even with the constraints. Okay. If any of you do that 8 block step and then the 9 block step, it's good to get an idea of how much more computation is required. Maybe try with 7 and 6 and 4. It's fun to see how fast that number of computations go up. Now, obviously, sometimes you get lucky. He got lucky, solved in 5 minutes. The real challenge is understanding the average case. Some people also talk about the worst case. These are all parameters of the problem. Now, wouldn't it be simpler, you think, to just say, okay, I'm just going to be prescriptive here and write a program that will always solve this. I will look for the 1 block and I will put it all the way to the right. And I'll look for the 2 block and put it on top of it. Then the 3 block, put it on top of it. Why aren't we solving it that way? What do you think?
So that when we do start giving rules on solver, we can see how much better it works.
That's a good idea. Yes, that's part of it. Another part of it is one of the slides I showed you early on in the course, where typical computer programming is a person programming the steps, right? But we're programming a system that will program the steps. Machine learning is not about writing all the steps yourself. It's about devising a system that will find its way there. And if we can do this for something that we actually understand, like stacking up blocks, this is a kid's toy, right? Then maybe we can use the same methodologies for situations that are so complex, we could never do it. If all we have is a heuristic, just throw everything in the computer and solve it. That's what we're getting toward. We want to use machine learning in situations where it's so complex, we could never do it ourselves. It's like a coping mechanism. You got to think, it's like you can't see as you go through this environment. And you could see it's so high dimensional you couldn't understand. What tools can we develop in a simple situation like blocks that will still apply in those more difficult situations? Okay. Every population, here's the born. Parent location. Mutation probability is 5%. Right. Okay. Who can tell me what they think this program's doing? Recreate the image? An image. It's not about an image. It's more about what those things are, the green things and the purplish things.
I think it's kind of like recreating plants and getting eaten by some creature, and it's the mutations of the plants to like survive, so they'll live longer, and then eventually they won't live. I guess the genes to not get eaten.
Not quite, but almost. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, my answer is very similar.
So I think the genes of the plants are not what's getting altered. The genes of the eaters. So the plants, when they get eaten, they ended up growing back, just part of the system. But some of these eaters are very inefficient. Some of them, spend a lot of their time moving around, or this guy's just going in circles, right? And every time you see the whole thing change, it's just starting over a new generation. What do you think the genes of the eaters might include?
It's the ones that eat the fish.
They're the ones who definitely do the best, yes. And in the next generation, their genes continue on. But what are in those genes? Obviously, it's not G, C's, T's, and A's. Something else. What is it? They might mutate, but what is in the genes?
Their ability to redirect.
Yes. What they do in different situations, right? Instructions, some simple set of instructions, very simple. Whenever you see one that's just, doing nothing, it's like, how do you even exist? Now, there's fewer and fewer of those, aren't there? They're changing. Some of them have very simple instructions, like just go really fast in one direction, right? Up or down. When you hit a wall, maybe turn around. There's still a few, though, that end up like this guy in the corner. This guy's just stuck. Look at that. He's definitely not eating anything this life. For the ones that don't do well, why do they keep emerging, do you think, in each new generation?
The plants were in that were in the pump before, so it's trying to eat instead of still.
Yeah, maybe they had a gene that would send them to a certain part of the board. And now that part of the board doesn't have any food. So they were well adapted for a past world, but not well adapted for the current world. The fitness landscape changed on them. Now, in the game we played at the beginning, those 4 numbers, those were genes. The analogy is that those were genes. Now, you were most adapted if you shared 3 genes with your neighbors. If you shared 4, it's too many, and you die off, or you go back to 1. But if you shared 2, you're doing good. But if you share 3, you are most adapted. It's a really sweet spot. But since the landscape's always changing, genes that are well adapted right now might be really maladaptive a few steps down the way.
So, do you think like this or the eaters they kind of plateau at one point, or do you think like eventually if you run it for so long they become so efficient that they just do want to- I'm getting
Like,
this.
yeah, no, these are exactly the right kind of questions. Is there a plateau? What would happen if the plants also adapted, you know? Another thing that we're not doing here is we haven't let the eaters decide how many kids to have. I mean, we can change that ourselves. And we can also change what happens to the plants. If the plant eats, it's gone. Now, there may be genes that are good for an eater to have, but bad if the whole population has them, right? Maybe this is a world where everybody's like, I gotta eat my food, and then everybody ends up starving to death at the end. Has anyone heard of the population equation? Simple population equation that takes in how many you have now and tries to predict how many there will be after the next generation. For deer, it doesn't matter how much food there is in the environment, they're always trying to have too many kids. Why? Why would that be well adaptive?
It's not like a prey animal thing.
Yeah.
It's just to have as much as possible. Predators or-
Yeah. It was, they evolved around wolves and, you know, cougars and other things. So I used to live in Maine, and in Maine, they watched the deer population. We'd gotten rid of most of the wolves, and the deer became way too numerous. So numerous that the males couldn't grow antlers and their hair was falling out. They were all undernourished because their program was just have as many kids as they can, no matter how much food there is. Wolves are different. Wolves will have fewer kids when there's less food. Which do you guys think humans are? Are we more like deer or like wolves in that way?
It depends on I want to say it depends on the era. Because in the current era, we're more like wolves, but in previous eras, like deer. And like in the Middle Ages, there was history of it where kids would like I think it's like 70 just die before they reach the age of 3.
Yeah.
So families just ended up having this.
Yeah, my great grandmother had 11 surviving children. That's just the surviving ones. I don't know if we even know the names of the others. So there's so many factors that can make a population do well or not. Okay, let's pretend we wanted to use a genetic algorithm to design a bridge or a truss. How might we go about doing that? This is something that was done. There's papers on it. It's really good work. How would you do it? And maybe why would you do it? You got to represent genes somehow, right? What do the genes represent? That's a good one, yes. What this guy ended up doing instead, I think, was deciding for a given number of connecting points, what are the distances? And then this could be stored like this. That makes sense, guys? And then he would try, I guess he would try out different configurations. There'd be some randomization, but maybe these two would be considered different species or something. Now, what would he be trying to maximize? What might he be trying to minimize with this? What do you think?
Maximize the stress.
Yes. Yes. And after they did, lots of generations of this, the one on the top left was the winner for that category. Max stress 202, and their total mass 155. Now the one on the bottom right looks like its total mass is a lot more, and it couldn't take as much stress. So these were the two kinds of operations that they use. Only these two operations. Two parents can have, we have one genome, and each part of the genome comes from one of the parents, and it's random which it comes from. And you guys are all familiar with this in actual genetics. And the other one is mutation. So if you do get a piece of DNA from a parent, maybe it just randomly changes. And this will change from a 1.3 to a 3.7. What other kinds of genetic modifications could there be? There is another kind in human life and life on Earth that's not listed here. So we have here genes that come from parents, where you'll take, some from mother, some from father, and the child or children each get random section from each parent. Or within the random section you get from a parent, a mutation could occur. We're all familiar with these. In real life biology, there is another way that evolution and genetic alteration occurs. Does anyone know what it is?
Are you talking about like different kinds of mutations? So like as you have a point mutation, you have like shifts where like roots up entire stranded.
That's good. I wasn't talking about that, but that is another. That's good. Yes. Shifts, and there could be times when it flips around. It's the wrong order. Now, another one is viruses. A virus, it hijacks the genetic, machinery inside your cell. Eventually, sometimes part of the viral DNA ends up in your DNA. And if it doesn't kill you, you might end up passing it on to your kids. We have inside us, some DNA that comes from viruses from long ago. Now, anyone know what this is? These are bacteria. Bacteria, they do have viruses. Viruses attack bacteria. And bacteria can have mutations. Can bacteria also have this kind of operator? Do bacteria ever have this? As far as I know, no. I mean, there could be some strange examples. No, why would that be bad to miss out on this? What are bacteria missing out on by not having parents, multiple parents? Every bacterium has one parent, right? Just butt it off of someone, That's like having one parent. I don't know which one is the parent, though. What are they missing out on in terms of the genetic algorithm of life?
Genetic diversification and like natural selection. The bacteria that
have better or excel. It's just natural selection.
Yeah, natural selection always works on a gene at a time, right? It could be one point or it could be a larger mutation, but it's one change, larger change. So let's say that this one bacterium right here has a small mutation that makes it way better. It's kind of its own species now, and it'll multiply faster. The other members of that group don't get the benefit at all. Their children don't benefit at all from that. What if this one over here also has a different, very beneficial mutation? It kind of becomes its own species. What we have as eukaryotic or animals, we have the ability to take this wonderful mutation that helps and this wonderful mutation that helps and combine them both in the same population. So it's like outsourcing evolution to a bunch of children and then merging the ones that are good for the environment that you live in. Bacteria are very, very small, way smaller than your cells. We all know we have bacteria in our guts, right? Anyone have a guess on the ratio? How many bacteria live in your gut in relation to human cells?
Is that also a human code?
10-to-1 ratio. In your body overall, there's about 10 bacteria cells for every human cell. You're mostly bacteria. Now that's if you just do it by number of cells. Bacteria cells are so small that's how it works out. But human cells are eukaryotic, way more complex. Now, we all marvel at life and how complex and beautiful it is. What we're trying to do right now in this course is do some biomimicry. See how nature solves the hardest problems, how we can solve them. This is computer generated, but it, to the best of the scientists' knowledge at the time, showed as a slice through a cell what the machinery looks like. I believe this is a microtubule, and these are kinesin, maybe, the proteins that bring things to different part of the cell. It's a machine. It's made of proteins. And these machines are so complex and beautiful. This is a ribosome. And its job is to take a little piece of RNA and make proteins with it. So on one part, the ribosome will take in, here's a ribosome reading some RNA, and it'll get to a certain part that will be a start codon. This would be encoded as 3 genes, maybe it's GCA, I don't know, but a start codon. It says, okay, I got to start now. And once it starts, every 3 genes it sees tells it which of the amino acids to pull in next. So it pulls in an amino acid, clamps it on, pulls in another one, and another one, and another one. And once it does, once it's done, when it hits a stop codon, then it kind of lets go. And that long chain of amino acids, we call protein, it will fold. It will fold into a unique shape. And the ribosome itself is a giant protein that folds. I mean, just imagine how many atoms there are in that, how complex that thing is. And there are some places where if it's one off, it doesn't matter, but other places, if it's one off, it ruins the entire thing. And now you have some weird genetic disease and you die at the age of 7 or something. These little bits of detail, sorry to get morbid, guys, but These little details sometimes matter, sometimes they don't. Now, if we were to represent this more simply in a computer science context, you could think of each number being a gene. You just have a list of numbers. Or maybe you have a square of numbers, or maybe you have something else. Maybe you have maybe the code to your program is the genes. Maybe that's what you hold. The entire chromosome would be all the genes together. And then a population would be a whole bunch of, instantiations of this object, whatever it is, each of them with different genes. Sometimes they just use crossover. So you just pick a point, a random point, and say, everything before this, we'll take it from the father, everything after, take it from the mother. That's one way to do this. And every one of these little choices you make in how you do the crossbreeding or the mutations, it's going to affect how the environment, how the population evolves, how fast they evolve, how well they do. And when you do a mutation, do you do it just one or several? These are all little choices that you can make when using a genetic algorithm. And in the end, if you're using it to find the right design for a bridge, it could help you get the answer very quickly, or maybe it takes millions of steps. Let's look at another fun example. Okay, we have a gene mutation probability of 10%. We have a gene mutation amount of 50%. Let's lower that to more like 5%. 5% is more realistic, and I think I've been told I have about 4% Neanderthal DNA. That stuff stuck around. Champions to copy. So the two top walkers just get copied back into the next generation. Let's simulate faster. Oops. Cancel. They randomly named the walkers. Hey, Isuhi Rokuyo. By the way, the name tells you how much of the genes are carried through. There's a correlation between the actual letters in the name and the genes. So Duyo is a very popular string. So there are actually instructions, little details in the genes that are associated with that. What do you think the genes are telling it? What do the genes express?
Rotational limbs.
That's probably it. Rotational limbs. I like the about section. What the hell is this? This observational pastime hopes to evolve walking features through genetic algorithms. When you fall down, you die, of course. How many steps or maybe how many seconds they stay alive? I think it's
Far they go.
how far they go, yeah. 300 something is the best we've done so far. There's the 500?
On the right.
Oh, yeah. Why would you want to do this instead of devising what your robot should do?
Sometimes it can be things you think of doing.
Yeah. There are, three-dimensional versions of this that they trained for a long time, and some of them would humanoid type things, shaped like this, would end up like walking on their hands and flipping around, doing all kinds of weird things because it worked. Okay, let's look at another one. We'll let that run. It'll probably just keep running. Okay, this one, he tries to train a genetic algorithm or use a genetic algorithm to train a car to run around the track. This is, of course, at the beginning, and it doesn't know how to do anything. It's basically random. But he trains it to, not bump into the walls too much. Generation 0. How many generations do you think it'll take? Just guess. 50? Well, here's generation 10. It's not any worse. It's okay. I think there's some rule where if they bump into the wall too much, they die, or maybe they die when they bump into the wall first time. I don't know. This is generation 50. And they do better for sure. But what they decided is that the fitness function wasn't good enough. Now, fitness function is a little bit like a heuristic. It's a function that tells you how good you're doing at something. So they chose a better fitness function. And you can go to this link in the slides, and it's a fun read. So one way they decided to make the fitness function better is to put these checkpoints in. Now they're only in for the purpose of the computer program. They actually take them out, but they're still there. And the fitness function uses them. And it gets better. So this is generation 50, but with that better fitness function. Generation 250. And now we're able to pretty much solve it. Still looks like a drunk driver. All right. This one's actually my favorite. All right. These are cars. The genes, what do you think the genes are deciding? Wheel size? The shape of the car itself. Yes, look at all those different shapes. And all those shapes did not do well. What else might the genes be deciding? That's good. Yep, that's probably it. Speed. What else? Maybe. Well, let's talk about weight for a second. Why don't we change the gravity from Earth to Jupiter and see what happens? When the car stops, it dies. And mutation size, let's bring that down to 5. Mutation rate can go up higher though. Okay, they're trying to drive on Jupiter now. See, it's hard to get up that hill when you're driving to Jupiter. It's a lot of gravity. but they'll be a little better this time. Oh. Look at that, we got a nice cluster near the front now. They're all kind of keeping up. Oh, look at that. Oh. So what ratios might be important within each of these cards? Ratio of what to what might be important?
One wheel to the other.
Yep, one wheel to the other. What else?
Distance between the wheels.
That's right, distance between the wheels. There's another one.
Height and speed.
Height and speed, good.
It seems like the back is heavy.
If the back is heavier, is that a good thing or a bad? Oh, look at that guy. Actually, that's really unique because no matter what, this thing is not gonna stop. I've never, it dies when it can't move.
Design. The peak of it.
Oh, I guess if you stay in the same place too long, you die. But it's gonna have a bunch of kids. And I can see two of its kids, for sure. Okay, it's gonna win again. This is definitely a child of that last one. Oh, this is gonna go. Both the wheels, so there must be a gene for how far apart they are, because these axles are right on top of each other. That's really surprising. Go for it, go little guy.
Oh, goodness gracious. Oh.
Oh, now you're stuck. But you did great. I think they each have an energy level. I think that's what it is. They get more energy. Oh, this guy is a kill code. Look at that. Okay, yes, they each have an energy level. And if they're still moving ahead, they keep getting more energy. They start running out of energy and then they get stuck. So these guys are going fast. Remember that one that was going really slow? It was still alive when all the others were dead, even though it was way behind. That's another strategy in life. Expend your calories very slowly and just outlive everybody. There are bacteria at the bottom of the ocean, middle of the Atlantic, that they metabolize so slowly, they live in 1,000 years as much as you would live in your life. All right, now we got a lot of pretty well adapted. I mean, that pattern of having a small body and two wheels so that you never actually get stuck on your own body of the car, that's a very popular pattern. It's definitely proliferated. But you need to have a lot of energy to get up these hills in Jupiter gravity. What do you think would happen if we mess with them a little bit and change things like the gravity? You'd think that, if you're strong enough to survive in Jupiter gravity, you can do well anywhere, right? No, why not?
Well, I guess you're not totally, like, maybe you need a little bit more, or you can get away with more speed in a less gravity environment. So all of these slower spinning ones aren't going to perform here as well.
You say the slower spinning ones won't perform as well.
Or maybe they will, but I think that that'll be like a big factor.
So if we go to less gravity, do you think that slow is good or slow is bad?
I'm gonna say slower is worse. Slow is bad.
Okay, so I'm gonna change the gravity to be the gravity of the moon. I want to raise your hands though. Is fast gonna be good or is fast gonna be bad? Fast for good, fast bad. All right. Oh, what's it gonna do here? That's a really bad wall. That's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes.
Yeah.
So, you know, the other ratio, I think that might be important is the ratio of the energy put into both wheels. I think they might be two-wheel drive, but I don't know.
Black means it's.
Black thing means it's not. Pretty sure. That's where all the drive comes from. What's that?
Through this graphs.
Oh yeah, let's. Oh yeah, if we actually, there's a lot of interesting stuff on here. We can watch in real time how the cars are doing.
Oh, no, no, yeah.
Now they're taking a long time to adapt to this. If we made the mutation rate 100%, the mutation size 100%, let's see what happens. Quick wait for them all to die.
But the real question is if the car or not.
They don't look like real cars today.
I feel like it's more of a bike. or a-
Yeah.
The other two wheels, there's.
Oh, this is.
All right, we're gonna let this keep playing, and I've got one last question for you guys. If you were to play NIM following instructions written in a genetic code, how would you do that? I mean, we can represent it as anything. You can represent it as zeros and ones, represent it as, you know, pieces of Python code. What are some ideas? What would the parts of your genome tell you to do? Okay, so you have a gene for how many and from where? Who goes first? Although that will probably be decided for you. What else?
variance between like steps, like how many I'm gonna grab this many this time, and 5 plus the next time, or whatever.
Say that again?
Like the variance that you're grabbing, the variance of the amount that you grab.
Okay, variance of amount taken. And that means you have an underlying distribution that you're drawing from. I'm gonna randomly decide how many to take. Randomization is a good thing to put in there. Now, do you remember our heuristics we went through when we played this in class? We had heuristic 1, heuristic 2, heuristic 3, heuristic 4. You guys all remember that, right? That could be what you put in DNA. And you'd have to give it an ability to come up with new things for the heuristics. If you had that, if you had a program that was the same program every time, but it had genes that decided how it operated, what could you do if you wanted to win the NIM competition? How do you use a genetic algorithm to win the NIM competition?
One that has every possible base rate gone through.
That's good. So you have your program, and then you have it run through every possible game state, see how it does. What if you want to change the DNA of your NIM program, your NIM player?
So you have like it's a model with your like successful tactics. Just way more so on successful tactics.
You could have it play itself. What would be faster and more efficient than just having it play itself, one at a time? Yeah, what if you had millions? What if you had whole populations of them? And you could see under certain conditions, certain NIM genetics would do really well. But maybe they only do well because of their neighbors. And when their neighbors figure things out, then that strategy doesn't work anymore and they have to change. So you have to play this out for many, 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 many generations until, like someone said earlier, it plateaus. You want to hit that stable point. Now, theoretically, that best program will play according to the Wikipedia instructions, which you're also welcome to use when we get to that point. Thank you, everybody.